All right, let's dive into something you might not think is exciting, but I promise it is. Zero-rated VAT in the UK. We all know the basics of VAT, but today we're going deep on those goods and services you actually don't pay any VAT on.
That's right. And I think you'll be surprised at what's on the list and what it tells us about the UK's priorities.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. What keeps your weekly grocery bill from being absolutely outrageous? Why can you still afford to buy books?
It's because of zero-rated VAT. It's easy to overlook how much this little tax tweak shapes our everyday lives.
Totally. So first up, let's talk about the stuff that keeps us going. Food and drink.
Right, the essentials. Most unprocessed foods and beverages are zero-rated.
So that's your bread, milk, fruits, vegetables, all the good stuff.
Exactly. The goal is to make healthy staples more accessible for everyone.
But I've also heard that this can unintentionally make those processed foods more expensive because they are taxed.
You're right, and that's a really important point. Aiming for affordability on one end can have these unintended consequences on the other.
It's like a constant balancing act.
It is. And speaking of balancing acts, where do you draw the line between processed and unprocessed? It's not always clear cut.
That's true. I mean, where do you even begin to categorize something like a Jaffa cake?
Well, that's actually a famous case, the Jaffa Cake case. It actually went to court to decide if Jaffa cakes were cakes or biscuits for VAT purposes.
Wait, really? They had a whole court case for a Jaffa cake.
Yeah.
So were they dunked in tea to decide or what?
Haha, not quite. Cakes are zero-rated, but biscuits aren't always. So the court had to figure out which category the Jaffa cake fell into. Factors like texture and how they go stale actually played a role in the decision.
That's so fascinating.
It is, isn't it? And in the end, the courts decided that Jaffa cakes are indeed cakes. So no VAT on those.
That's good news for Jaffa cake lovers everywhere.
Definitely. But the bigger point is that even seemingly simple categories can get really complex. And that complexity has real-world implications for businesses.
Absolutely. It's not just about saving a few pence on your Jaffa cakes.
Uh,
It's about understanding how these decisions affect businesses and consumer behavior.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's move on to another category that's close to my heart as a parent. Children's clothing and footwear.
Right. Here in the UK, all clothes and shoes for kids under 14 are zero-rated.
Which is a huge help for families, especially when kids grow out of things so fast.
Exactly. It helps keep costs down.
But there are some size restrictions, right? I can't just buy a pair of kid shoes for myself.
Ha, you're right. There are specific size limits, especially for footwear, to prevent that.
Makes sense. So it sounds like there are lots of details and nuances to keep track of with all these categories.
Definitely. And this brings up a really important point. HMRC, the UK's tax authority, provides detailed guides on all these zero-rated categories. They're a must-read for anyone who wants to understand the specifics.
That's good to know. Now, onto something I'm personally passionate about. Books and publications. I love that printed books, newspapers, and magazines are all VAT-free.
And since 2020, that includes e-publications as well.
Which is awesome. Digital learning for the win.
Absolutely. It's all about making information and education accessible to everyone, no matter the format.
I think it's great that the UK has this policy. It shows they value learning and easy access to information.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's not just about affordability. It's about fostering a culture of knowledge and an informed public.
And on that note, let's talk about another policy that reflects a commitment to a better future. Public transport.
Right. Encouraging people to ditch their cars for a bus or a train. It's good for everyone, right?
Less pollution, less traffic, a healthier planet. It's a win-win.
Exactly. And that's why most forms of public transport, like buses and trains, are zero-rated. You save money and help create a greener future.
I love it. But before we get into more specific categories, let's talk about something that often confuses people. The difference between exempt and zero-rated. I know they sound similar, but there's a key distinction for businesses, right?
You're absolutely right. So with zero-rated goods, the consumer doesn't pay VAT, right?
Right.
But businesses can reclaim any VAT they paid on their costs to produce or sell those goods.
So in a way, they're getting a VAT refund.
Exactly.
But with exempt items, things like financial services or education, healthcare, there's no VAT charge to the consumer,
Uh-huh.
but businesses can't reclaim any VAT on their costs either.
You got it.
So that's a huge difference for businesses.
Absolutely. And it has a big impact on how businesses operate and price their services.
This is where things start to get really interesting, right? We're seeing how these seemingly technical details of tax policy can have a ripple effect on everything from consumer choices to how entire industries are structured.
It's all connected. And it reminds us that tax policies are never just about numbers. They're a reflection of a society's values and priorities.
Exactly. And we'll explore more about those values and priorities when we come back for part 2.
And we're back. Still diving deep into the world of zero-rated VAT in the UK. We've talked about what's zero-rated, but let's get into how businesses actually manage these goods. It's not as simple as just not charging VAT, right?
Right. So for businesses dealing with these zero-rated goods, what are some of the challenges they face?
Well, record keeping is crucial. Consumers aren't paying VAT on those goods, sure, but businesses still have to track every single thing.
I see. So every invoice, every receipt, it all matters.
It all matters. HMRC needs to be able to see that everything's above board, complete transparency.
Of course. Now, I'm curious, how has technology changed this whole record-keeping process? Things have gotten a lot more digital these days.
Oh, absolutely. The UK government's Making Tax Digital initiative, that's been huge.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Basically, if your business is registered for VAT, everything has to be done digitally now.
So no more stacks of paper receipts and massive spreadsheets.
Nope. It's all cloud accounting, digital platforms, the whole 9 yards.
Wow, that's a big change.
It is. But in the end, it actually makes things a lot more efficient. And of course, HMRC has tons of guidance on their website about making tax digital so businesses can make sure they're doing everything right.
That's good. So even with all this guidance, I imagine mistakes can still happen. What are some common pitfalls businesses might run into when dealing with zero-rated VAT?
Well, one of the biggest things is correctly classifying items. Businesses need to be absolutely certain if something is zero-rated, reduced-rated, or standard-rated.
Because if they get it wrong.
If they get it wrong, they could be hit with some pretty hefty fines. They might even have to pay back VAT.
Ouch. That sounds like a nightmare. So it seems like it would be wise to talk to an expert if there's any doubt.
Absolutely. When in doubt, get some professional advice. A good accountant can be a lifesaver when it comes to VAT. They can help businesses stay on the right side of HMRC and avoid those costly mistakes.
Yeah, accountants are the real MVPs. Okay, so we've been talking about these VAT rules as if they're set in stone, but I know the world of taxes is constantly changing.
You're telling me. Just look at e-publications becoming zero-rated. That was pretty recent.
That's true. And then, of course, there's Brexit.
Oh yeah, Brexit definitely shook things up, especially when it comes to VAT on goods moving between the UK and the EU.
Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms.
It is, and it's changing all the time. So businesses that are involved in cross-border trade, they really have to stay informed. Luckily, HMRC's website is a great resource. Their VAT guides are really thorough, and they're updated all the time.
It sounds like HMRC has really stepped up its game in helping businesses navigate all this. But I want to shift gears for a minute and get a bit more philosophical. We've talked about the practical side of things, but what about the bigger picture? What would happen if we, say, got rid of zero rating altogether?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question. Imagine the ripple effect that would have. What would happen to the price of all those everyday essentials? Would people start spending their money differently? Would certain industries be affected more than others?
Right. It raises a lot of questions about how we as a society think about affordability and accessibility.
It really does, and those questions don't have easy answers. Every tax decision has these consequences, and we don't always know what they'll be.
So it's all about weighing those potential outcomes.
Exactly, and sometimes those outcomes are positive, sometimes they're negative, sometimes they're totally unexpected. That's why it's so important to keep having these conversations and exploring different scenarios.
That's a great point. We've covered a lot in this part, from the everyday challenges businesses face to the larger implications of zero-rated VAT. All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into zero-rated VAT. We've talked about the what, the why, even some what-ifs.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. So now let's try to bring it all together and see what we've learned.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we started by looking at all the different goods and services that fall under this zero-rated umbrella.
Right. Everything from basic food to children's clothes,
Books, public transport,
even exports.
and we talked about the reasons behind those zero ratings.
Making essential goods more affordable.
Encouraging certain behavior.
Supporting businesses.
And, of course, we can't forget about that Jaffa cake case.
Ah, yes, the Jaffa cakes. That was a fun one.
It really highlighted how complicated it can be to define these categories for VAT.
You think something simple, then bam, it ends up in court.
Exactly. And then we moved on to how businesses actually handle these zero-rated goods,
All the record keeping they have to do,
making tax digital,
and how important it is to get expert advice if you're not sure about something.
especially with all the changes that Brexit brought about.
Right, Brexit definitely added another layer of complexity to the whole thing.
We even got a little philosophical, thinking about what would happen if zero rating didn't exist.
What would that do to prices? How would it affect different industries? It's a lot to think about.
It is. It really shows you how tax policy is about so much more than just numbers.
It's about values, the kind of society we want to live in.
Absolutely. So what are the key takeaways you want our listener to walk away with today?
Well, I hope they've realized that zero-rated VAT, it's not as simple as it seems on the surface. There's a lot going on behind the scenes.
It's a lot more interesting than people might think.
It really is. And I hope they've also gained an appreciation for how interconnected everything is, how these little tax details can have a ripple effect across the entire economy.
That's a great point. I also hope they've maybe developed a bit of curiosity about these systems that shape our lives.
Even the ones that might seem boring at first glance.
Because once you start digging a little deeper, you realize how fascinating it all is.
Exactly. And the more we understand these systems, the better equipped we are to make informed decisions.
As consumers.
As citizens.
And even as advocates for change.
So keep asking questions.
Keep exploring.
And never underestimate the power of a good deep dive.
Well said. On that note, we'll wrap up our exploration of zero-rated VAT. Thanks for joining us.